Hello YouTube, this is Goddard Radio Moscow here again with another beer review. Now in my opinion this is a very special beer review today. I've got one of the iconic beers of the American craft brewing industry for you today. This is the Anchor Steam Beer, which comes to you from San Francisco, California, over on the west coast of the United States. Now for this video I actually want to give a little shout out to the guys at Thistle News in Aberdeen where I bought this beer. They're a small sort of newsagent shop just in Holborn Street for those of you who are indeed living locally nearby to me in Aberdeenshire. So they've got a nice selection of Mikkeller and Toyo and some American craft beers as well. So if you're living in the local area, definitely check those out. I'll put the Facebook page into the link to that in the video description, so check them out if you are nearby. But as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll just take you through a history of the Anchor Brewery today. This is a really interesting one, so I hope that you would stay with me for this one. But if you are simply just interested in the tasting portion of the video, then feel free just to fast forward towards the last few minutes where you'll catch that particular segment. Now the roots of the Anchor Brewery actually trace back to the gold rush in California in the mid 1800s. Now in 1849 a German brewer by the name of Gottlieb Breckel arrived in San Francisco, California with his family, and just over 20 years later in 1871 he bought an old beer and billiard saloon on Pacific Street just near Russian Hill for $3,500, and he transformed that into the brewery that would about 20 years later become the Anchor Brewery. Now 25 years later in 1896 another German brewer by the name of Ernst Barrett and his son-in-law Otto Schinkel bought this brewery on Pacific Road, and they renamed it Anchor, and this is why the bottles on the label bear the year 1896. Now no one's quite sure why the brewery was named Anchor, but it's suspected that this was to do with the fact that the San Francisco city was now a very large and booming port with a lot of export and import activity. But in 1906 it turned out to be a very, very bad year for the Anchor Brewery. Ernst Barrett died very suddenly in the February, and then 2 months later the Anchor Brewery was consumed by a fire resulting from the great earthquake of that year, and it didn't get much better in 1907. In the January of that year, when the brewery was just opening in their new location south of Market Street, Otto Schinkel was actually run over by a streetcar. Although fortunately the German brewers Josef Kraus and August Meyer kept the brewery going, along with liquor store owner Henry Tschichin. Now the Anchor Brewery was actually effectively shut down in 1920 with the introduction of Prohibition, and there's little or no record of the Anchor Brewery doing anything either legal or illegal during this particular period, although the website admits that there may have been some activities during this period when there was the bootlegging of alcohol and things like that going on. But as we all know, the Prohibition in the United States failed and was lifted in 1933, and at this point Joe Kraus once again began brewing the steam beer after a hiatus of 13 years. Now the brewery then had another stroke of bad luck in February 1933 when it was consumed by fire once again, and then after this Joe Kraus reopened the brewery in an old brick building with a new partner, Joe Allen, and this location was a few streets away from the brewery's current location that they have today, and I'll tell you about that just in a minute. Now Kraus and Allen managed to keep the Anchor Brewery afloat until Kraus's death in 1952, but by late 1959 the demand for beer in America had actually changed to the mass-produced light lager rubbish that all of those of us who are beer geeks don't particularly like, but this resulted in a massive decline in sales for the Anchor Brewery, and at the age of 71 Joe Allen shut down the Anchor period, although thankfully this was just for a very, very short period. Now in 1960 the brewery was bought by Lawrence Streese, who reopened it in 1960 at a new location nearby, but Joe Allen actually stayed with the brewery, but he and Streese found it very difficult to actually convince the local bars to start reserving Anchor Steam, and by 1965 Streese was ready to follow in the footsteps of Allen and shut down the brewery once again. But in 1965 a Stanford graduate by the name of Fritz Maytag learned when he was frequenting the old spaghetti restaurant in North Beach in San Francisco, he learned that the Anchor Brewery was actually preparing to shut its doors for the last time, and he rushed out to buy a 51% share in the brewery, and he got this for only a few $1,000s, but this saved the brewery thankfully from the imminent bankruptcy that it was facing. But in 1971, 100 years after Gottlieb Breckel had founded the brewery that then became Anchor, Fritz actually decided that he would bottle the Anchor steam beer for the first time, and by 1975 the brewery had produced 4 other distinctive beers: the Anchor Porter, the Liberty Ale, the Old Foghorn, the Barley Wine Ale, and they had also produced their first annual Christmas Ale. Now by 1977 the brewery had 5 different products, they employed a dozen different people, and they had actually nearly outgrown their brewing facility that they had on 8th Street. And after a long search, Fritz Maytag purchased an old coffee roastery which had been built in 1937, and on the 13th of August 1979 Anchor produced their first batch of steam beer at this new brewery in Mariposa Street, and this particular facility remains today as their current home. But in 1984, the brewery celebrated their 5th anniversary in the new brewery by producing a special wheat beer, and this incidentally was the first wheat beer brewed in the United States since Prohibition, and it's now known as the Anchor Summer Beer. But in 1989 saw the introduction of the Sumerian project, and this produced a beer called Ninkasi, which is apparently made from a 4,000-year-old recipe. And also after the Loma Prieta earthquake in that same year, Anchor's Earthquake beer was born. And in the 90s the brewery actually began their artisan distilling operations, and they produced the Old Portero rye whiskey in 1993, and this was followed in 1997 by their unique pot distilled gin, Junipero. Now in 2010, the most recent point in history for this brewery, after 45 years Fritz Maytag announced that he would be retiring from the Anchor brewery. He obviously didn't have any sons or anything like that to pass the brewery on to, but he announced his retirement from the Anchor brewery, and he sold the brewery to Keith Gregor and Tony Folliot, who agreed that they would preserve the iconic brewing operations of the Anchor brewery, and they would also expand the brewery's export markets and things like that. But just to list for you the other beers that are available from the Anchor brewery, there is Anchor Small, Liberty Ale, which is an IPA, there's Anchor Porter, Old Foghorn, Breckles Brown, California Lager, which I have a bottle of and will review for you in the next few weeks. There is Humming Ale, the Bock Beer, Big Leaf Maple, Our Barrel Ale, and they also have their annual Christmas ales. Now just to tell you a little bit about this, the concept of steam beer, the name steam beer apparently comes from the 19th century when steam was a nickname for beer brewed on the west coast of the USA under primitive conditions without ice, and they say that the name is most likely to relate to the original fermenting practice on San Francisco rooftops in a cool climate, and apparently the foggy night air naturally cooled the fermenting beer, creating steam off the watering pans. But the term steam apparently is an official trademark of the Anchor brewery today, and it tells you this just on this little top section of the label here. There's some quite interesting things that they all tell you on the beer here, and it basically, this one just goes through the label just goes through the history that I've just gone with you there, and tells you a little bit about the individual beers itself. But just to let you have a little look at the bottle art itself. Sorry, I'm stuttering just now. I'll just let you have a little look at that. These are quite cool, and they're very unique shaped bottles. I've never seen another brewery using this type of bottle. Maybe that's trademarked actually, but as you can see here, it says made in San Francisco since 1896. As I mentioned, was when the brewery was first named Anchor Brewery after the fact that San Francisco was a port. Just to let you see the bottle cap, a lot of the different Anchor beers have different colours, but as you can see, it is just simply the same Anchor that is on the bottle label here. Sorry, I'm stuttering quite badly tonight. But let's just get this guy open and get on with the tasting. This is a really awesome beer. I've had this one before, but this one is a 4.9% steam beer, a very unique style I have to say, and apparently it uses Northern Brewer hops, and it is malted with two-row pale and caramel malts. But without further ado, let's get this guy open and get on with the tasting of this beer. Just preserve my bottle cap as I usually do with these. There's a lot of smoke coming off this one, or steam rather, just as I pour this out here. And as you can see, this is a really, really beautiful kind of goldeny amber colour beer. I'll just swirl the last little bit and try and get a nice head up on this beer. That should give it a fairly nice kind of frothy head. Okay. So in terms of the appearance, as you can see, it's a really nice, beautiful crystal clear golden amber colour, very, very, very clear appearance. There's a nice sort of one finger frothy head on this one. There's some bigger bubbles in there as well. In terms of the aroma, it's a very, very malty aroma, and there's some grassy element to it as well. I'm getting some caramel malts and some breadiness. Like I say, there's that kind of grassy underlining to it as well, but there's some hoppy bitterness, and I'm getting some sort of earthy character to this one as well actually. but it's a very, very unique aroma. This is probably one that with this beer, I know this is a very, very good beer. I would highly recommend that you just buy this one and try it for yourself. There's nothing else around that's actually quite like this beer. But yeah, in terms of the aroma, very malty, caramel malts, a hint of breadiness to it, some grassy elements, and there's also a quite hoppy bitterness to it with just an earthy feel to it. But very unique aroma, I have to say. So let's just give this guy a taste. But yeah, very, very malty to begin with. And there's nice caramel and bready notes in there supporting that. But there's a nice sort of slight roasty character to this one, and that kind of underlines the whole thing. This is, like as I said, this is a very, very unique style of beer, so it's worth your while trying this one. But it's very, as I say, very malty, nice caramel and bready notes in there with a slightly roasty character. It has quite a hoppy bitterness at the end of it. It's quite earthy hops in this one, I would say. This is one of these ones that is actually quite difficult to describe the taste of. It's very, very unique, and you just need to try it for yourself. It's a beautiful, beautiful beer. Mainly nice earthy hops with the sort of caramel underlining to it there. Really, really beautiful beer, and it has that bit of breadiness to it. In terms of the mouthfeel of this one, I'd call this one medium bodied. It's got a very smooth and very crisp mouthfeel, just the right amount of carbonation on this one. A genuinely beautiful beer, this one. Nice earthy hop, as I say, nice earthy hops mixed together with some quite nice caramel elements and a little bit of breadiness to it. Very unique taste. If you see this one, buy it. There's nothing else I can really say to you. Buy this beer if you see it. You will not be disappointed by anything that comes out of the Anchor Brewery, and that's guaranteed. These guys are one of the pioneering breweries in the United States. These are one of the guys, if you ask anyone that loves US craft beer, the Anchor Brewing Company from San Francisco are one of the godfathers of the American craft brewing industry. Really, really beautiful beers. Definitely check the brewery out, and it's very worth it. It's you know, you'd be stupid not to try these beers if you have the opportunity, in my opinion. A really, really beautiful beer. I highly recommend that you try it. But I hope this particular beer review has been informative for you. I'm going to go away and enjoy the rest of this now. But I hope it's been informative for you. As I say, this is a very kind of difficult one to describe as a very unique flavour, so if you see it, buy it, give it a chance. But I'll be back with more Anchor beer reviews. I have the California Lager, and I'm going to try and get a few of the other ones for you. I really love this brewery, I have to say. And as I say, it is very worth it's really worth your time to check these guys out and give them a go. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. Please let me know in the comments section your own particular thoughts on this beer. And also please like, subscribe, share, you know, all the usual YouTube jazz. I hope you've enjoyed my beer review. You've been watching Goddard Radio Moscow. I'll be back soon with more. Cheers.